A silent message sits waiting inside a clay tablet 4,000 years old. For over a century, the world's sharpest minds have stared at its symbols and understood nothing. This is the reality for 30 ancient scripts that remain undeciphered, their secrets locked away. By the end of this journey, you will hold the keys to history's greatest unsolved puzzles, from a lost alphabet carved on a wooden disc to a language pronounced but not understood. What if an entire civilization's story is trapped in a handful of strange markings? What forgotten wisdom might be hiding in plain sight? Why does the human desire to leave a message so often outlast our ability to read it? The silence of the Indus Valley is profound. Across a vast landscape in what is now Pakistan and northwest India, a civilization thrived for centuries, building planned cities with sophisticated drainage, crafting exquisite jewelry, and trading across oceans. And yet, they left behind no grand monuments boasting of kings, no epic poems etched in stone. Their primary voice comes from thousands of small, square stone seals, each carved with a beautiful, enigmatic script. This is our first great undeciphered puzzle, the Indus Valley script, dating from roughly 2600 to 1900 before the Common Era. These artifacts present a tantalizing and frustrating challenge. The inscriptions are astonishingly short, most containing only 4 or 5 symbols. You hold one in your hand, feeling the cool stone, tracing the elegant lines of a unicorn-like creature above a row of precise geometric signs. What does it say? Is it a name, a title, a prayer, a trade receipt? The brevity itself is a wall. Without a longer text, patterns are harder to find, grammar is impossible to detect. It is like trying to reconstruct an entire language from a collection of random license plates. The second, and perhaps greatest, obstacle is the lack of a Rosetta Stone. For Egyptian hieroglyphs, the key was a slab bearing the same message in 3 scripts, one known. For the Indus, no such bilingual text has ever been found. We have no way to anchor these strange symbols to a language we understand. This leads to the third fundamental mystery: what language did they even speak? Scholars have proposed connections to ancient Dravidian languages, to early forms of Sanskrit, and other possibilities, but it is all speculation. The debate goes deeper. Some experts argue the symbols are a true writing system, encoding a spoken language. Others look at the short, repetitive nature and suggest it might be a system of non-linguistic symbols like clan marks or religious sigils, not meant to be read as sentences. The truth is, we do not know. Deciphering this script would be more than an academic triumph. It would shatter the silence of a lost world. We could finally hear the names of their people, understand their laws, read their myths. We could learn why their magnificent cities were eventually abandoned. That small stone seal would transform from a beautiful artifact into a direct message, a voice from the dawn of urban life, speaking across 4,000 years. And if this script, from one of humanity's first great experiments in city living, remains locked, what hope do we have for others? Yet the silence of the Indus is not unique. Across the sea, on the sun-drenched island of Crete, another civilization left behind a script that taunts us with its proximity to a solution. This is Linear A. For centuries, the Minoans built breathtaking palaces like Knossos, vibrant with frescoes of leaping dolphins and elegant courtiers. Their society was sophisticated, peaceful, and deeply connected to the sea. And they kept records. Thousands of clay tablets pressed with a precise, linear script have been found in their palace archives. We know these marks documented their economy, listing quantities of olive oil, grain, spices, and textiles. We can even read them aloud in a way. That is the tantalizing, frustrating heart of the mystery. In the 1950s, a related script called Linear B was deciphered. It turned out to be an early form of Greek, used by the later Mycenaeans who occupied Crete. Because linear shares many of the same symbols, scholars can assign probable syllable sounds to its signs. We can vocalize the words, but it is like hearing a beautiful song in a language you have never encountered. The sounds are clear, but the meaning is utterly lost. The Minoan language itself is a ghost. It does not belong to the Greek family or to any other well-understood language group we know from the ancient world. It is an isolate, a linguistic island as real as Crete itself. So we hold a tablet, sound out the syllables, and understand nothing. Deciphering Linear B was a monumental achievement, but it only deepened the shadow around its predecessor. It revealed how the Mycenaean Greeks adapted the Minoan writing system for their own tongue, like taking the shell of a beautiful, unfamiliar instrument and restringing it to play a different tune. The original melody, the Minoan thoughts and prayers and daily accounts faded away. To crack Linear would be to finally hear that original music. It would allow us to move beyond just admiring their art and architecture and to understand their own words for their world. What did they call their gods depicted in those sacred figurines? How did they refer to the sea that sustained them? What stories did they tell that were lost when their palaces fell? The script is the last barrier between us and the true voice of Europe's first great civilization, a voice we can pronounce but cannot comprehend. While the Minoans left their records on clay, an even older mystery was taking shape far to the east. In the dusty plains of what is now Iran, around 3100 before the Common Era, a scribe in the ancient city of Susa pressed a stylus into a fresh clay tablet. The marks he left are among the oldest writing attempts in human history, and they remain a profound enigma. This is the Proto-Elamite script. It emerged not long after the very first writing systems in neighboring Mesopotamia, and it represents a bold, independent experiment in capturing language. We know what these tablets were for: administrative accounting. They list numbers of livestock, quantities of grain, and stores of goods. In fact, we can understand part of them, the numerical signs. Scholars have cracked the counting system, so we can look at a tablet and see that it records, for instance, 10 sheep or 5 jars of oil, but that is where our understanding stops. The rest of the symbols, the ones that should tell us whose sheep they were or where the oil was destined, are utterly silent. The script uses hundreds of signs, many beautifully pictorial, showing animals, containers, and human figures. Yet we cannot read a single word. This creates a bizarre situation. We can see the math, but we are deaf to the meaning. The core problem is twofold. First, the texts are frustratingly brief and formulaic, like reading only the totals column from a ledger without any of the item descriptions. There are no stories, no letters, no kingly boasts, just these repetitive economic lists. Second, we do not know what language the signs were meant to record. Was it an early form of Elamite, a language we know from later centuries in the region? Or was it a completely different, now vanished tongue spoken by the first city dwellers of Susa? Without that anchor, every attempt at decipherment floats in a sea of guesswork. Furthermore, the script itself had a short and turbulent life. It evolved rapidly and then vanished within a few centuries, replaced by other systems. This means we have no long, continuous tradition to trace, no later versions to compare it to. It is a brilliant, fleeting spark of early human ingenuity that flickered out before it could fully illuminate itself. Deciphering Proto-Elamite would be more than solving a puzzle. It would open a window into the very mechanics of how civilization itself was built. Susa was a crucial hub, a link between the Mesopotamian world and the distant Indus Valley. Understanding its records would show us the nuts and bolts of early trade, taxation, and state formation. We would hear the economic heartbeat of one of humanity's first cities, learning not from ruins or artifacts, but from the original, intended words of its clerks and kings. To break its code would be to recover the first balance sheet of civilization. The frustration of reading numbers without words finds a haunting parallel in the most isolated script ever created. Far out in the vast Pacific Ocean, on the remote island of Rapa Nui, master carvers once bent over slabs of dark Toromiro wood. Their tools etched not random patterns, but a deliberate, flowing script of astonishing beauty. This is Rongo Rongo, a writing system born in complete isolation, thousands of miles from any other literate culture. The glyphs are intricate and alive, depicting frigate birds with curved beaks, leaping fish, strange humanoid figures, and complex geometric designs. They wind across the tablets in a unique reverse Boustrophedon style, meaning the lines are read left to right. Then the tablet is flipped to read the next line, like an ox plowing a field back and forth. It is a system of remarkable sophistication, suggesting generations of development, and its meaning is utterly lost to us. The tragedy that sealed this script's fate is as stark as the island's famous stone moe. In the 1860s, Peruvian slave raiders descended on Rapa Nui, carrying off nearly half the population, including the ruling class and the learned elders, the ones who would have held the knowledge of Rongo Rongo. Devastating epidemics followed. Within a single generation, the living chain of transmission was broken forever. The last person who might have fluently read these elegant glyphs died without passing on the key. Today, only about 24 authentic wooden artifacts survive, a tiny and fragile corpus. This scarcity makes every attempt at decipherment a high-stakes gamble with very little material to test theories on. The central debate mirrors that of the Indus script. Is this true writing or something else? Some researchers see the consistent structure and distinct signs as evidence of a full script, capable of recording the Polynesian language. Others look at the artistic, rhythmic quality and propose it might be proto-writing, a sophisticated memory aid for priests to recite sacred chants, genealogies, or historical traditions. Without a bilingual text or a living tradition, we are left staring at a gallery of beautiful, silent pictures. Decoding Rongo Rongo would do more than solve a linguistic puzzle. It would give the Rapa Nui people their own voice back. For centuries, their history has been told through the silent moe or the theories of outsiders, often focusing on ecological collapse. These wooden tablets could contain their own epic stories, their creation myths, the names of their ancestors, and the true reasons behind the island's profound transformation. They are the lost library of a people who gazed at the same stars from the most remote inhabited spot on Earth, a library whose shelves we can see but whose books we cannot read. But the drive to leave a mark is far older than any city or palace. Long before the pyramids of Egypt or the ziggurats of Mesopotamia, in the green river valleys of the Balkans, a farmer shaped a pot from dark clay. Before the firing, while the surface was still soft, they took a sharp tool and carefully incised a series of marks, a sequence of lines and angles, a comb shape beside a zigzag. This act, repeated on thousands of artifacts across centuries, creates one of archaeology's most tantalizing and contentious mysteries, the Vinca symbols. Named for the site in Serbia where they were first discovered, these markings belong to the Neolithic Vinca culture, a society of sophisticated farmers and artisans who flourished from roughly 5,500 to 4,000 before the Common Era. Their world was one of timber longhouses, elaborate pottery, and hauntingly beautiful goddess figurines, and on their tools, their altars, and their everyday vessels they left these signs. The symbols themselves are deceptively simple: crosses, branching lines, chevrons, grids, and what look like letters M or X. They appear singly, in pairs, or in short rows. Their extreme age is what stuns the imagination. They are not just older than Linear or the Indus script, they predate the very first cuneiform tablets of Sumer by over 2,000 years. If these marks are writing, then the story of literacy does not begin in the sun-baked river valleys of the Middle East, but in the forested heart of prehistoric Europe. That single word, if, carries immense weight. The debate among scholars is fierce and fundamental. On one side are those who see these recurring, standardized symbols as a true proto-writing system. They argue the signs are too consistent and too complex to be mere decoration, perhaps serving as ownership marks, ritual symbols, or early accounting tokens for a pre-literate society. They point to the fact that similar signs appear on objects found hundreds of miles apart, suggesting a shared system of meaning. The other side cautions us against seeing writing in every scratch. They argue that without longer texts, without any clear grammatical structure or context linking the symbols into readable sentences, they remain just that, symbols. Beautiful, meaningful, but not a script encoding spoken language. They might be akin to masons' marks or potters' signatures, or powerful religious icons, not meant to be read but to be seen and recognized. The silence here is different. It is not the silence of a lost library like Rongorongo, but the silence of a first, faint whisper, one we cannot be sure was ever meant to form a word. Proving the Vinca symbols are writing would be a historical earthquake. It would mean that the human impulse to record information symbolically sparked independently, far earlier and in a very different place than we ever believed. We would have to rewrite the deepest chapters of our intellectual history, granting these early European farmers a place among the world's first inventors of a technology that would change everything. For now, those marks on the ancient pottery remain a quiet, persistent question, a whisper from the dawn of settled life that we have not yet learned to hear. Centuries before the elegant lines of linear filled the palace archives, a different kind of mark held power on Crete. In the workshops of the early Minoans, master craftsmen carved intricate pictorial symbols into soft stone and clay, creating what we now call Cretan hieroglyphs. That name is a modern accident, a placeholder born from early confusion. These symbols share nothing with the vast, monumental writing of Egypt beyond the simple fact that they are also pictures. They are a homegrown invention, a unique and enigmatic script that represents the very first attempt on the island to fix language into a permanent form. The artifacts themselves are small and intimate, primarily seal stones and clay bars. A scribe would press one into wet clay, leaving behind a personal signature, a mark of ownership, or perhaps a sacred invocation. The images are a snapshot of their world: a bull's head, a ship, a double axe, a cat-like animal, a human eye. We can see what they saw, but we cannot hear what they meant. The scarcity of evidence is a formidable barrier. With only around 150 known objects bearing these signs, the statistical pool for analysis is perilously shallow. It is like trying to learn an entire language from a handful of random postage stamps. Each new discovery is a monumental event, a potential key that could finally turn the lock. The relationship between this pictorial script and the later, linear scripts is one of the great unanswered questions. Did Cretan hieroglyphs slowly streamline and evolve over generations into the more abstract signs of linear A? Or did the two systems exist side by side for a time, serving different purposes in a complex society, perhaps one for ritual and sealing, the other for palace administration? We simply do not know. This script is the foundational layer, the deep bedrock upon which later Minoan literacy was built. To decipher it would be to open the earliest window into their consciousness. We could move beyond admiring their art and architecture and finally read the labels they gave to their world. What name did they carve for the bull, that central figure in their frescoes and myths? What title did the first ruler of Knossos stamp onto his official documents? Which of these beautiful miniature pictures represented a god, a commodity, or a place? Cracking this code would not just give us words, it would give us origins. It would reveal the moment when abstract thought on Crete first demanded a permanent symbol, showing us the very birth of recorded history in the Aegean world. And if the first words of a civilization can be lost so completely, what does that say about the fragility of our own? The story of Minoan writing takes its strangest turn not in a dusty archive, but in a single, sunlit room of the Phaistos palace. Here in the early 20th century, archaeologists uncovered a fired clay disc, small enough to hold in your hands, yet monumental in its mystery. This is the Phaistos disc. Its surface is a crowded gallery of tiny, precise impressions, a spiral of 241 symbols winding from the outer edge into the center. A man walks, a bird flies, a shield stands, a flower blooms. Each image is clean and distinct, pressed into the soft clay, not by a stylus, but by a pre-made seal, like a stamp. This single, revolutionary detail makes the disc a technological marvel, an example of movable type printing over 3,000 years before Gutenberg. Someone in the second millennium before the Common Era created a set of reusable stamps to compose this one message. The effort implies something of immense importance, a statement meant to be perfect, permanent, and perhaps widely understood. Yet for all its technological clarity, its meaning is a perfect void. The disc is an orphan. No other object like it has ever been found on Crete or anywhere else in the ancient world. Those 45 distinct stamp symbols appear nowhere else. This isolation is what makes the disc so famously and frustratingly undecipherable. Without parallel texts, any proposed translation is just a theory floating in empty space, impossible to verify or disprove. Is the spiral a story to be read from rim to center or from center out? Is it a religious hymn, a treaty, a calendar tracking agricultural cycles, or even an ancient board game? The very fact that it was stamped, not written, suggests it might have been meant for replication, yet we have found no copies. It stands alone, a solitary broadcast from a lost frequency. Every few years, a new scholar claims to have cracked its code, proposing it records an ancient hymn to a mother goddess, or a narrative about a maritime expedition, or a geometric puzzle. But without a second text to provide context, these decipherments remain captivating stories, not proven facts. The disc is the ultimate locked room mystery of archaeology. We have the artifact, we understand the method of its creation, we can see every symbol with perfect clarity. But the door to its message remains sealed because the key, a shared cultural context or a related inscription, was lost the moment the last person who understood it laid the disc down. It is a message from the Minoan world that was, for reasons we will never know, never repeated, leaving us with a beautiful, silent, and stubbornly singular echo. Across an ocean and a world away from the Mediterranean, a different kind of colossal mystery stands in the humid jungles of ancient Mexico. The Olmecs, flourishing from roughly 1500 to 400 before the Common Era, carved their legacy in stone, most famously in those immense, brooding head sculptures with their enigmatic helmets. They are called the mother culture of Mesoamerica, the foundational civilization from which later giants like the Maya and the Aztecs would draw their gods, their art, and their cosmic concepts. And like any true parent culture, they seem to have passed down something even more profound, the gift of writing. The evidence is tantalizing but heartbreakingly sparse. The most compelling piece is the cascadule block, a rectangular slab of serpentine stone discovered in a gravel quarry. Its surface is carved with 62 distinct symbols arranged in clear horizontal rows. We see an insect, an ear of corn, a throne-like structure, and abstract shapes that feel undeniably systematic. It is not random decoration, it has the look of a true text. Other brief inscriptions appear on ceremonial celts, those polished axe heads, and on fragments of pottery. Each one is a whisper. The problem is the deafening silence that surrounds these whispers. The total corpus of known Olmec writing would not fill a single page. We have phrases, perhaps, but no stories, no chronicles, no lengthy dedications. It is an alphabet glimpsed through a keyhole where we can see a few letters clearly but have no hope of reading the book. This scarcity makes every potential decipherment a fragile hypothesis built on a handful of cracked stones. Yet the stakes for understanding this script could not be higher. Deciphering it would answer the most basic and most profound questions about this foundational people. We do not even know what they called themselves. The name Olmec comes from a much later Aztec word. Their own name for their land, their cities, their identity is locked in those symbols. We see their art filled with were jaguars and rain gods, but we do not know the names they spoke in prayer. Those colossal heads almost certainly portray powerful rulers, but those rulers are anonymous to us, their deeds and dynasties lost. Cracking the Olmec code would give voices and names to these silent stone giants. Furthermore, it would rewrite the intellectual history of an entire continent. Most scholars believe the Olmec script is the direct ancestor of all later Mesoamerican writing systems, including the magnificent, fully deciphered script of the Maya. If we could read the Olmec texts, we would see the prototype. We could trace how the Maya concept of sacred kingship, their calendar system, and their mythological stories evolved from this earlier root. It would be like discovering the very first draft of a great epic poem, showing us the original ideas before they were elaborated into their classic form. The Cascadule block, then, is not just a curious artifact. It is potentially the first chapter of written thought in the Americas, a chapter we have held in our hands for years but have never been able to read. To unlock it would be to hear the mother culture speak, finally telling us her own story in her own words, and revealing how she taught her children to write theirs. The Olmec whispers find a stronger, clearer voice a few centuries later, further south along the steamy isthmus of Tehuantepec. Here, on grand stone monuments, a new script emerges, one that is no longer a tentative collection of symbols but a confident, complex writing system. This is the Isthmian script, sometimes called Epi-Olmec, and it stands as a monumental missing link in the story of American literacy. Carved between roughly 500 before the Common Era and 500 of the Common Era, its glyphs are works of art in themselves, intricate and packed with detail, suggesting a mature tradition of scribes and stone carvers. The most famous examples are breathtaking. The La Moggiora Stela is a towering slab of stone, its surface covered in over 500 finely carved glyphs arranged in elegant columns, a true text of imposing length and ambition. The Tuxtla statuette, a smaller but equally exquisite greenstone figure, wears a brief inscription like a personal badge of identity. These are not random marks, they are the deliberate records of a sophisticated society. And we can actually read parts of them. This is where the story of the Isthmian script becomes a tantalizing dance between breakthrough and dead end. Decades of meticulous work by dedicated scholars have yielded a crucial victory, the cracking of the numerical and calendrical system. We can look at a column of glyphs and identify dates, tracking the long count calendar that the Maya would later perfect. We can see numbers attached to events, so we know when something happened, often down to the precise day in their cosmic cycle, but we have no idea what happened. The rest of the glyphs, the ones that should name the ruler, describe his conquests, his rituals, or his divine patrons, remain a visual symphony without sound. The primary obstacle is linguistic. The leading theory suggests the script records an early form of a mixed Zoquian language, a family still spoken in the region today. But connecting those ancient, elaborate pictures to specific words and grammar in a modern descendant language is a monumental task without a bilingual key. It is like having a beautifully illustrated history book where you can read the chapter numbers and the dates in the margins, but every sentence of the story is written in a cipher. The script's position in history is what makes its silence so profound. It appears to be the direct evolutionary bridge between the sparse, proto-writing of the Olmec and the dazzling, fully realized script of the classic Maya. You can see the conceptual lineage, the growing complexity, the development of grammatical markers. Deciphering Isthmian would be like finding the lost intermediate manuscript between a rough draft and a published masterpiece. It would show us the mechanics of how Mesoamerican writing matured, how it learned to record not just things and dates, but complete narratives of human power and divine interaction. To finally read the La Majora Stela would be to open a history book from a pivotal epoch, filling a centuries-long gap with the names, wars, alliances, and ceremonies of the cultures that held the key geographical and cultural crossroads of the Americas. We would meet the forgotten kings who stood between the age of the colossal heads and the age of the pyramid temples, hearing their own boasts in their own words, completing a family tree of thought that has been missing its central generations. High on a mountain flattened by human hands, the city of Monte Albon commanded the Oaxaca Valley. Its builders, the Zapotec people, began carving their history into stone around 500 years before the Common Era, creating one of the Americas' first and most enduring scripts. These are not the brief whispers of the Olmec, but bold, public declarations. The Zapotec script adorns grand stelae, the walls of tombs, and elegant ceramic urns, announcing the presence of a powerful, literate state that would thrive for more than a millennium. The glyphs themselves are a fascinating blend, part picture, part puzzle. You see a recognizable hill or a temple combined with stylized dots, bars, and enigmatic abstract shapes. This combination tells us they were thinking in sophisticated ways, using logograms for whole words alongside phonetic signs for sounds. And from these stones we have learned two monumental things. First, we can read their calendar. Zapotec timekeeping was precise and deeply important, and scholars have matched their day signs and numbers to the later Mesoamerican systems we understand. Second, we can often identify the names of people, almost certainly the rulers who commissioned these monuments. We see glyphs that likely mean jaguar or storm cloud, attached to portraits of stern, seated figures. So we know when these rulers lived and we know what they were called. This is a huge leap forward from total silence, yet it is also a special kind of frustration. We are left with a history book that has all the chapter titles and the king's names, but every paragraph beneath them is blacked out. The verbs, the nouns, the connective tissue of language that would tell us what these named individuals actually did remains encrypted. Did this jaguar named King conquer a neighboring city? Did that storm cloud lord conduct a sacred ceremony to bring rain? The stones do not tell us, at least not in words we can comprehend. The core of the problem is linguistic isolation. The Zapotec language, in various forms, is still spoken today in Oaxaca, a living thread stretching back over 2,500 years. This should be our Rosetta Stone, but the gulf between the modern spoken language and the ancient written symbols is vast. Languages evolved dramatically over centuries, and without a clear bilingual text to anchor the ancient glyphs to specific modern words, the connection remains theoretical. We have the descendant language, but we lack the cipher to translate the ancestor script. Deciphering even a single full Zapotec sentence would be a transformative event. It would crack open the political and social world of a foundational Mesoamerican civilization. We could move beyond just admiring Monte Albon's impressive architecture and into the nuanced reality of its history. We could map its alliances and rivalries, understand its ceremonies, and hear its own accounts of its origins. This script is the direct voice of a culture that dominated southern Mexico long before the Aztec Empire ever rose, a voice that has been speaking clearly from mountaintop stones for 2,500 years. We have learned to recognize its accent, but we still cannot understand its stories. And if a language that still has living speakers can guard its ancient secrets so well, what hope is there for scripts born from tongues that fell silent millennia ago? The transition from monumental art to practical tool is a story written in stone in the desert. Scattered across the remote mining camps and temples of the Sinai Peninsula, a handful of crude inscriptions hold the secret to one of humanity's most transformative ideas. This is the Proto-Sinaitic script, carved between roughly 1,850 and 1,550 years before the Common Era. To look at these scratches on rock is to witness a quiet revolution. The signs are small, rough pictograms, a simplified ox head, a house, a water ripple. Their origin is unmistakable. They are borrowed, stripped-down versions of the grand Egyptian hieroglyphs that surrounded the Semitic-speaking workers and soldiers stationed there. But their purpose was radically new. These people were not writing Egyptian. They were performing an act of linguistic alchemy, taking the complex, multi-layered writing system of their powerful neighbors and forging from it something elegantly simple, the world's first alphabet. The principle itself is the breakthrough, one sign, one consonant sound. That ox head pictogram no longer stood for the whole idea of an ox or for the complex Egyptian word for ox. It stood for the first sound of the Semitic word for ox, which was aleph. That house glyph became bet, the water sign became mem. This was a democratization of writing, reducing the need to memorize thousands of symbols to learning a couple dozen. We can trace this family tree. That ox head aleph would evolve through Phoenician into the Greek alpha and our letter A. The house bet became beta and then B. The skeleton of our own alphabet is visible in these desert carvings, yet for all we understand about its revolutionary mechanics, the script itself remains largely unreadable. The surviving texts are frustratingly brief, often just a few words scratched onto a statuette or a mine wall. We can sound out the consonants A, L, P, H, but without vowels, which the early alphabet omitted, and without longer context, the words blur into ambiguity. Was it a name, a prayer, a marker of ownership, a plea for safety in the dangerous mines? The tantalizing possibility is that these first alphabetic scribbles were not royal decrees, but the mundane, personal marks of ordinary people, soldiers far from home or miners toiling in the turquoise pits, using their new, simple tool to say, "I was here." Deciphering even one complete proto-Sinaitic sentence would be like finding the workshop notes of the inventor of the wheel. It would show us the very first thoughts deemed worthy of this new, revolutionary technology. What did they choose to record the moment they held the power to write easily for themselves? Was it a dedication to a god, a message to a loved one, a simple signature? To crack this code would not just solve a linguistic puzzle, it would allow us to eavesdrop on the birth of an idea that would eventually circle the globe, an idea born not in a palace scriptorium, but in the dust and sweat of a desert outpost where one culture's sacred art became another's practical tool for the ages. The desert-born alphabet was not the only experiment unfolding along the Mediterranean coast. In the bustling, cedar-scented port of Byblos, a city whose very name would become synonymous with books, scribes were engraving a different kind of mystery onto bronze. These are the tablets and spatulas of the Byblos syllabary, a script that stands as a proud, independent island in the sea of early writing. Created between roughly 1,800 and 1,500 years before the Common Era, this system used around 100 distinct signs, a number that strongly suggests it was syllabic. Each sign likely stood for a consonant-vowel combination, a sophisticated and efficient way to record language. Here was a major trading hub, a gateway between Egypt and Mesopotamia, developing its own complete writing tradition. And then it vanished without a trace. The strangest part of this mystery is its profound isolation. Byblos is legendary as the port from which the Phoenician alphabet, the direct ancestor of our own, would later spread across the ancient world. Logic screams that this earlier script must be its parent, a prototype that slowly streamlined into the famous 22-letter system, but the glyphs themselves refuse to cooperate. Scholars have compared every curve and line, and the Byblos signs show no clear evolutionary relationship to the later Phoenician letters. They are not a rough draft, they are a completely different book, written in a language and a logic we have lost. The inscriptions themselves are cruelly brief, offering no lengthy texts to analyze for patterns. Some researchers have squinted at the signs and seen vague, ghostly resemblances to early scripts from the Aegean, like Cretan hieroglyphs or even Linear A, hinting at a possible web of maritime connections far more complex than we knew. But these are shadows, not substance. Without a longer text or a bilingual clue, every proposed link remains a speculation. Deciphering this syllabary would do more than add another language to the historical record. It would reveal a lost intellectual universe in the Levant. Before the alphabet simplified everything, a sophisticated, independent writing tradition flourished in one of the ancient world's greatest crossroads. What stories did the merchants and priests of Byblos consider important enough to cast in bronze? Were they recording trade treaties with distant Crete, hymns to a forgotten sea god, or the lineage of their own kings? This script represents a road not taken, a fully developed system of writing that was ultimately overshadowed and erased by the dazzling efficiency of the alphabetic revolution. To read it would be to recover a voice that chose a different path to record its world, a path that fell silent just before another, world-changing one began to speak. The story of writing is not always one of simple inheritance. In the rocky highlands of central Anatolia, the Phrygians built a powerful kingdom whose most famous ruler, King Midas, became legend for his golden touch. By the 7th century before the Common Era, they were using an alphabet borrowed from their Greek neighbors to the west, a script we can read. But a century earlier, at the very dawn of their power, they were writing in a different voice. The great burial mound at Gordian, traditionally linked to Midas's father, holds a silent witness. On its stone facade is an inscription carved in a stark local script, a set of signs that look alphabetic but speak in a code we have not yet cracked. This is the earliest Phrygian writing, and it guards the transition from myth to history. The challenge is twofold. First, the sign forms are unique. They share a family resemblance with other early alphabets of the region, but their precise sound values are uncertain. It is like looking at a familiar alphabet where someone has subtly rearranged the letters so that a shape you think should sound like B might actually represent a T. Second, the language itself is archaic, an early form of Phrygian that predates the later, better documented phase of the language. Without a longer text or a clear bilingual inscription, every attempt at translation is built on shifting sand. Deciphering these few, monumental words would be like turning a key in the lock of a legendary kingdom. We know the Phrygians were a major power, interacting with the colossal Assyrian Empire to the east and the kingdom of Urartu to the north. Their capital, Gordian, was a wealthy hub, but what did their own foundational documents say? The Gordian inscription likely records a religious dedication or a funerary text for a king. To read it would give us the actual terminology of their statecraft and their worship. We could move beyond Greek stories about Midas and hear the Phrygians' own conception of kingship, perhaps even verifying the names and relationships of their early monarchs. It would provide a snapshot of Anatolia in the early Iron Age, a time of shifting alliances and emerging identities, written not by their Assyrian rivals or Greek trading partners, but by the Phrygians themselves. That stone at Gordian is not just an archaeological artifact, it is the first draft of a kingdom story, written in a hand we have yet to fully recognize. A coastal city holds its secrets tightly against the Mediterranean waves. Sidetic, the script of the ancient city of Side, is a perfect storm of historical mystery. Here, on the southern shores of Anatolia, a vibrant port culture minted coins and carved stone inscriptions in their own unique alphabet for centuries, from roughly the 5th to the 3rd centuries before the Common Era. We have the artifacts, beautiful coins bearing the city's name, and a few fragmented stone slabs. We can see the alphabet clearly, a set of about 25 elegant letters that feel familiar yet strange. And that is where our understanding stops. The sound values of these letters are a matter of fierce debate. Scholars can propose how they might have been pronounced, but without a longer text or a clear bilingual clue, these proposals are educated guesses echoing in a void. The language behind the script deepens the enigma. It does not match the well-documented Luwian languages of inland Anatolia, and it is distinctly not Greek, despite the heavy Hellenistic influence washing over the region. It appears to be a linguistic isolate, the unique voice of Side itself, a tongue that flourished in this one coastal pocket and then vanished without leaving any clear descendants. The inscriptions we have are cruelly brief, often just a few words on a coin, legend, or a broken piece of a dedication. It is like trying to learn English from a handful of stamped slogans on modern currency. You might get "In God We Trust," but you would never grasp Shakespeare. This scarcity makes every step forward agonizingly slow. Each new fragment is a monumental discovery, yet it rarely provides the contextual leap needed for a full decipherment. To crack the Sidetic code would be to recover the pride of a city that refused to be fully absorbed. At a time when Greek culture, language, and writing were becoming the dominant forces across the Eastern Mediterranean, Side insisted on minting its official coinage and carving its public monuments in its own script. This was a powerful statement of identity. Reading these texts would tell us what that identity was built upon. Were they recording the names of local deities worshipped in their famous temples? Were they outlining trade laws for the merchants in their bustling port? Were they celebrating a dynasty of rulers who navigated the tricky politics between Hellenistic kingdoms and Anatolian powers? Sidetic is the defiant signature of a coastal culture that maintained its own voice in a chorus, increasingly singing in Greek. Unlocking it would not just add another language to a list, it would open a window into a very specific kind of resistance, the quiet, persistent act of a people writing their own story in their own letters, even as the tide of history seemed to flow in another direction entirely. The defiant voice of Sidon and Side was not the only script carried by Mediterranean currents. Far to the west, the island of Cyprus held a secret of its own, one written in the clay of a forgotten port. For 500 years, from roughly 1550 to 1050 before the Common Era, scribes across the island pressed styluses into soft clay, recording their affairs in a script we call Cypro-Minoan. The name itself is a clue pointing to its probable origin. The signs bear a clear, undeniable resemblance to the linear, a script of Crete, suggesting that Minoan traders or colonists brought the idea of writing to this copper-rich island. But the language they recorded was not Minoan. Over 200 inscriptions have been found on tablets, clay cylinders, and pottery fragments, a corpus substantial enough to offer real hope. And from these, scholars have made a crucial deduction. The script is almost certainly a syllabary, where each sign stands for a consonant-vowel pair, much like its linear ancestor. We can even identify some sign groups that repeat, likely marking common words or names. This is the tantalizing edge of a breakthrough. We understand the mechanics of the lock, but we lack the key to turn it. That key is the language. What tongue did these ancient Cypriots speak before Greek speakers arrived in waves centuries later? The leading candidate is a language scholars call etched, meaning true Cypriot. Remarkably, inscriptions in this later, still undeciphered language survived on the island into the classical period, written in a different Greek-derived script. Some believe Cypro-Minoan records an early form of this mysterious native language, a linguistic thread stretching across a millennium of island history. If that connection could be proven, it would provide the bilingual bridge needed to finally read these Bronze Age texts. Deciphering Cypro-Minoan would do more than satisfy linguistic curiosity. It would illuminate a pivotal, shadowy chapter in Mediterranean history. Cyprus was not a backwater, it was the central hub of the ancient copper trade, the metal that gave the Bronze Age its name. Its ports were meeting points for ships from the Aegean, Anatolia, Egypt, and the Levant. To read these tablets would be to open the ledgers and correspondence of this international marketplace. We could move beyond just finding copper ingots in shipwrecks and learn the actual terms of trade, the names of the merchant families who controlled it, the treaties with foreign powers, and the religious rituals that blessed this vital commerce. We would hear the island's own voice, explaining its role as the indispensable engine of the Bronze Age world, a voice currently silent beneath the weight of its own beautiful, unreadable signs. The Mediterranean's alphabetic currents washed onto the shores of Spain, but the peoples there shaped the letters to fit a very different voice. On the rocky cliffs and ancient coins of the Iberian Peninsula, a family of scripts emerged, a final written testament from the world just before Rome's shadow fell. From roughly the 4th to the 1st centuries before the Common Era, the pre-Roman inhabitants, groups like the Celtiberians and the Contestani, carved and stamped their history in two main scripts, Northeastern and Southeastern Iberian. These are not completely alien symbols. In fact, that is the source of both our progress and our profound frustration. We can look at an inscription and recognize the influence of their trading partners, the elegant letters of the Greek alphabet and the practical script of the Phoenicians. The Iberians adapted these foreign signs, creating a system that was partly alphabetic and partly syllabic. This hybrid nature gives us a crucial foothold. Because we know the source alphabets, scholars have successfully assigned sound values to many of the signs. We can stand before a stone slab in the Spanish countryside and read the text aloud, pronouncing the syllables with reasonable confidence. The words ring out in the air, a ghost of a language spoken over 2,000 years ago, and then the silence descends. We have no idea what those words mean. The Iberian language is a complete isolate, unrelated to Latin, to Celtic, or to any other known language family in ancient Europe. It is a linguistic island, and we possess no dictionary, no bilingual text, no Rosetta Stone to bridge the gap. We are in the bizarre position of being fluent in the pronunciation of a language we cannot comprehend. The inscriptions themselves are numerous, found on lead sheets that may be letters or legal documents, on pottery marks, and most famously, on the silver and bronze coins minted by independent Iberian towns. We see the names of cities like Arsaus or Ilterta proudly stamped beside symbols of local power, a galloping horseman or a bearded face. We can sound out the mint marks, but we cannot read the decrees that authorize the coinage or the treaties those coins paid for. Deciphering even a single lead sheet would be a historical earthquake. It would finally let us hear the voices of the peoples who fiercely resisted Roman expansion for generations. We could move beyond Roman historians, who often dismissed them as barbarians, and understand their own social structure, their laws, and their concepts of justice. What did a Celtiberian warrior consider a binding oath? How did they organize their complex hilltop settlements? What gods did they invoke on those coins, and what rituals did they perform in their sacred caves? The script is their direct testimony, a last stand of cultural identity recorded in a language that was ultimately overwhelmed. To crack this code would be to recover a lost European consciousness, one that looked out across the Mediterranean from the western edge of the known world, trading with Greeks and Phoenicians while fiercely guarding its own unique tongue. We can already hear its echo, but the meaning of its final words before the Roman silence fell remains just out of reach. Deep within a Bulgarian cave, a wall holds a solitary, silent conversation. The Satovo inscription is a ghost, a collection of roughly 50 signs carved directly into the stone, utterly alone. There are no other texts nearby, no pottery shards, no tools left behind to give it a date or a purpose. This isolation makes it one of the most maddening puzzles in all of epigraphy. To stand before it is to feel the weight of a complete void. The signs themselves are the first mystery. They are crisp, deliberate, and unique. You see vertical lines with branching hooks, shapes like tridents or stylized trees, and intricate geometric combinations. They look systematic, like a true script, but they refuse to match any known alphabet, syllabary, or set of symbols from the region's long history. This visual orphan has sparked a century of scholarly debate with no resolution. The battle over its age is fierce. Some researchers, struck by the carving's patina and style, argue it could be astonishingly ancient, a relic from the Neolithic or early Bronze Age Balkans. Others place it 1,000 years later, suggesting it is a Thracian message from the time of the Roman conquest. Still others propose a medieval origin, perhaps a cryptic marker left by proto-Bulgars or a solitary monk. Without any archaeological context, the inscription floats in time, unattached to any specific era or culture. This temporal ambiguity fuels the linguistic guessing game. Is this a rare sample of the lost Thracian language, a tongue we know existed from Greek historians but of which we have almost no written traces? Could it be an early form of a Bulgar script brought from the steppes? Some have even seen faint, perhaps illusory, resemblances to Phrygian letters from distant Anatolia. Each theory is a door, but every door is locked from the inside. The core of the problem is its absolute singularity. In cryptography, you need volume. You need multiple messages to compare, to find patterns, frequencies, and repetitions. The Satovo inscription is a single, short broadcast. It is like receiving one encrypted sentence from a lost civilization and being asked to rebuild their entire language and history from it. There is simply not enough material to work with. Any proposed decipherment is, therefore, more a work of creative imagination than proven science. Solving this would require a miracle of discovery, finding a second inscription, even a fragment that uses the same sign. That parallel text could be a bilingual, or it could simply provide enough additional symbols to crack the code through pattern analysis. Until that day, the wall in the cave speaks only to itself. It is a perfect snapshot of the decipherer's despair, a clear message from a human hand that we can see and touch, whose meaning has evaporated into the centuries of Balkan history. It reminds us that a script does not need to be beautiful or complex to be impenetrable. It simply needs to be alone. A piece of wood, waterlogged and dark with age, rested at the bottom of a Neolithic lake for over 7,000 years. The Despilio tablet was not discovered in a desert tomb or a palace archive, but preserved in the mud of a lakeside village in northern Greece. When archaeologists carefully cleaned its surface, they revealed a grid of carved lines and symbols, a deliberate pattern etched by a farmer or an artisan around 5,260 years before the Common Era. This date is the shock. It is older than the pyramids of Egypt. It is older than Stonehenge. It predates the very first cuneiform in Mesopotamia by more than 2,000 years. If these marks are writing, then the entire timeline for the birth of literacy collapses and is rebuilt in a European lakeshore settlement. The symbols themselves are stark, a series of linear and angular shapes, lines with crossbars, branching forms, and what looks like a rudimentary arrow or a tree. They are arranged in rows, a structure that feels intentional, not random. But what was the intention? The village of Despilio was a community of early farmers, living in wooden houses on stilts over the water. They fished, they cultivated crops, they made pottery. Did they also need to write? The debate around this single piece of wood is a microcosm of the entire struggle to understand proto-writing. On one side, scholars point to the organized, repetitive nature of the signs. They argue that the systematic arrangement suggests a cognitive leap beyond simple pictograms or ownership marks, perhaps representing a very early, structured attempt to record language or complex information. The alternative view is cautious. Could these lines be a builder's blueprint, a tally of seasonal tasks, or a set of ritual symbols known only to a shaman? Without a second tablet, without any other example of the same system, the Despilio tablet stands in heartbreaking isolation. It is a solitary data point in a graph with no other points, making any definitive conclusion nearly impossible. The preservation of the tablet is itself a minor miracle, saved only by the oxygen-free mud of the lake bed. It hints at a terrifying possibility. What if such perishable materials, wood, bark, leather, were the common canvas for early writing in forested Europe? If that were true, then the entire prehistoric record is biased toward the durable clay of the Middle East, and we have lost whole chapters of intellectual history simply because they were written on materials that returned to Earth. The heat of the debate comes from the staggering implications. Proving the Despilio symbols are linguistic would not just add another script to the list, it would append a foundational narrative of human progress. It would mean that the spark of writing, that quintessential marker of civilization, ignited independently in multiple places across the globe, and that the farmers of Neolithic Greece were grappling with abstract symbolic communication at the same time as, or even before, the temple accountants of Sumer. For now, the tablet sits in its museum case, a dark slab of wood with quiet lines. It is either one of the most important artifacts ever discovered, a Rosetta Stone from a time before history, or it is a beautiful, enigmatic piece of folk art from a lakeshore village. It challenges us to decide how brave we are willing to be with our past, and how much we are willing to let a single, silent object rewrite the story of the human mind. 3 small clay tablets unearthed in a Romanian village hold a controversy that reaches across continents and millennia. Discovered in a burial pit alongside human bones, the Tartaria tablets are tiny, each no larger than a postage stamp, and incised with a series of angular, deliberate symbols. They date to around 5,300 years before the Common Era, placing them squarely in the era of the Neolithic Vinca culture. At first glance, they seem like cousins to the Vinca symbols found on pottery. But a second look sends a jolt through any student of ancient writing. Some of the markings bear a startling, almost uncanny resemblance to early Sumerian pictographs and even to the later wedge shapes of cuneiform. The spiral, the goat or bull head, the branching tree, these forms feel hauntingly familiar from the clay records of Mesopotamia, a region thousands of kilometers away. This visual echo ignited a firestorm. Could these Romanian tablets be proof of a staggering, prehistoric connection between the Balkans and the birthplaces of civilization in the Near East? The implications were explosive, suggesting a flow of ideas or even people at a time when most maps show isolated, Stone Age communities. Mainstream scholarship, however, quickly erected a wall of skepticism. The primary objection is one of sheer distance and time. The tablets predate the earliest known Sumerian writing by over 1,000 years. If the symbols are related, it would mean the idea of writing traveled from Europe to Mesopotamia, a complete reversal of the traditional narrative. For most archaeologists, this is an extraordinary claim requiring extraordinary evidence, and 3 tiny tablets are not enough to rewrite the prehistory of literacy. The shadow of forgery has also loomed, though rigorous scientific dating of the associated bones and artifacts consistently supports their astounding age. The consensus leans heavily toward coincidence or, more intriguingly, convergent evolution. This is the idea that 2 separate human societies, grappling with the same need to mark ownership, record a ritual, or denote a concept, might independently arrive at similar abstract shapes. A circle for the sun, a branching line for a tree, these are universal observations that could lead to universal symbols. So what are they? The burial context suggests a profound purpose, perhaps amulets for the afterlife, tokens in a funerary rite, or seals denoting the status of the deceased. But were they meant to be read? The sequence of symbols arranged in what looks like rows begs for interpretation as a message. Yet without more examples, they remain a cryptic trio, a sentence of 3 words from a language we cannot identify. The Tartaria tablets force us to confront the messy, non-linear nature of human innovation. They are either a monumental red herring, a case of profound parallel invention, or a fragile thread connecting 2 worlds we thought were separate. They sit at the crossroads of evidence and imagination, reminding us that the deepest past often presents us not with answers, but with riddles that challenge the very frameworks we use to understand our own history. Even in a script we can mostly read, ghosts remain. The oracle bone inscriptions of China's Shang dynasty are a triumph of decipherment. For over 3,000 years, these ancient tortoise shells and ox scapulae, cracked by fire and inscribed with questions to the spirit world, were silent. Then, scholars painstakingly matched their elegant, angular characters to the later Chinese writing system, unlocking the administrative and religious mind of a Bronze Age kingdom. We can read the king's inquiries. Will it rain tomorrow? Will the harvest be good? Is the ancestor causing this toothache? We know the names of his consorts and his enemies. This script is a bridge, not a wall, yet on a handful of these very bones, a different kind of mystery lingers. Scattered among the familiar columns of text are occasional characters that defy every catalogue. Epigraphers call them ghost characters. They are shapes that do not correspond to any known glyph in the extensive Shang lexicon. You can be fluent in oracle bone script and still hit a symbol that stops you cold, a unique arrangement of lines that means absolutely nothing to modern understanding. These outliers are tantalizing loose ends in an otherwise solved puzzle. What could they represent? The most likely explanation is also the most frustrating. They are rare words that simply vanished. They might record the name of a minor tributary state that was erased from history after a single rebellion. They could be a unique title for a ritual specialist whose office died with him. Perhaps they are an archaic term for a plant or animal that later acquired a completely different character. In a vast kingdom, local dialects and specialized priestly vocabularies would have produced words that never made it into the mainstream and were lost when those specific contexts disappeared. Another possibility is that they mark the very edges of the Shang world. If a scribe needed to record the name of a distant mountain or a foreign people encountered only once by a trading party, he might have improvised a character on the spot, a one-time phonetic borrowing or a descriptive picture that never entered the standard set. These ghosts, then, could be snapshots of first contact quickly forgotten. There is also the chance they were experimental signs, attempts by a scribe to refine or abbreviate a complex concept that never caught on. Imagine a court clerk trying to invent a shorthand, carving it once, and having his innovation rejected by tradition. That single, rejected character would sit on that bone forever, a fossilized mistake. The challenge with these ghosts is their scarcity. With only one or two attestations, there is no pattern to analyze, no context strong enough to force a meaning. You cannot decipher a word from a single example. Solving them requires a miraculous find, a second bone where the ghost appears in a clearer, more explanatory phrase. Fully identifying even one of these characters would be a small revolution. It would not rewrite the entire history of the Shang, but it would fill a precise, intimate gap. It could reveal the name of a lost village, clarifying the dynasty's true geographical reach. It might give us the ancient Chinese word for a mythical creature known only from later folklore, connecting Bronze Age belief to medieval legend. Or it could provide the term for a specific ritual object, letting us finally put a name to a curious artifact sitting unlabeled in a museum case. These ghosts are reminders that decipherment is rarely a complete victory. Even when we hold the key to an entire library, there can still be a few lines in the margins, written in a hand we do not recognize, asking a question we have not yet learned to hear. A kingdom's voice can be stolen by the very writing it adopts. The Khitan people, nomadic horsemen from the eastern steppes, conquered northern China and founded the mighty Liao dynasty. For over 2 centuries, from 907 to 1125 of the Common Era, they ruled a vast empire, yet they faced a profound cultural dilemma. Their sophisticated Chinese subjects had a writing system thousands of years old, a script that carried the immense prestige of civilization itself. To simply use Chinese, however, risked being absorbed, their unique identity swallowed by the literary tradition of the people they governed. So they did something extraordinary. They created not one, but 2 writing systems of their own. The first, called the Khitan Small Script, was a clever syllabic system. Through relentless effort, scholars have managed to decipher parts of it, giving us precious glimpses into Khitan life. But it is the second script, the Khitan Large Script, that stands as a monumental and silent wall. This was the script of state power, carved onto stone stelae at imperial tombs and on the walls of important temples. It was meant to last forever, declaring the glory of the Khitan emperors to eternity. And for us, it has succeeded only in preserving their silence. The large script is logographic, meaning each character represents a whole word or concept, much like Chinese characters. But these are not borrowed Chinese symbols, they are original creations, a visual language born from the steppe. Over 1,000 distinct characters have been catalogued, a complete and complex writing system. We can see its structure, its elegance, its deliberate design, yet we can read almost none of it. The characters stand like an army of sentinels guarding a history we cannot access. The obstacles to cracking this code are formidable. First, there is the dire lack of lengthy bilingual texts. We have no Khitan large script equivalent of the Rosetta Stone, no inscription that repeats the same message in a language we already know. The few bilingual materials that exist are frustratingly short, offering phrases or titles, not the lengthy narratives needed to unravel grammar and vocabulary. Second, and perhaps more daunting, is the language itself. The Khitan tongue is extinct. It belongs to the Para-Mongolic family, a branch distinct from the later Mongol language of Genghis Khan, and it has no close living relatives that are well documented. We are trying to reconstruct a ghost language using a ghost script with almost no living sounds to guide us. Deciphering even a single monumental inscription in the large script would be a historical revelation of the highest order. For centuries, our knowledge of the Liao dynasty has come primarily from Chinese historical chronicles. These sources, written by the conquered, often portray the Khitan through a lens of cultural superiority, labeling them as barbarian outsiders. Their own laws, their epic poetry, their court rituals, their version of their rise to power, all of this is missing. The large script stones are their own history books written in their own hand. To read them would be to finally hear the empire's story from the throne room itself, not from the scribes in the southern capitals they ruled. We could learn how they saw their own conquest, how they justified their rule over millions of Chinese subjects, and how they blended steppe traditions with the trappings of a settled empire. It would restore agency and complexity to a people remembered largely as a footnote before the Mongols. These silent stones are more than artifacts. They are the unopened autobiography of a lost empire, a defiant statement of identity that chose to speak in its own voice, even if that voice now speaks in a cipher we struggle to hear. The defiant silence of the Khitan large script was a challenge their successors could not ignore. To the east, another powerful steppe confederation rose, the Jurchen. In the early 12th century, they toppled the Liao dynasty and established their own Jin empire, which would rule northern China for over a century, locked in a tense stalemate with the sophisticated southern Song dynasty to the south. The Jurchen faced the same cultural dilemma as the Khitan: how to govern a vast, literate Chinese population without losing their own identity. Their solution was both pragmatic and ambitious. They created a script of their own. The Jurchen script, developed around 1120 of the Common Era, was a deliberate hybrid. Its creators looked at the complex logograms of the Khitan large script and the elegant characters of Chinese writing, and they borrowed, adapted, and invented. The result was a writing system with a large set of logograms, some taken directly from Chinese with new Jurchen meanings, others freshly crafted to represent the unique concepts of their own language and steppe culture. This act of creation was a profound statement of sovereignty, a declaration that the Jin dynasty was not just another barbarian regime, but a legitimate empire with its own intellectual tradition. And today, a significant portion of that tradition remains locked behind those very characters. Deciphering the Jurchen script is a puzzle with a tantalizing head start, yet one that still ends in frustrating silence. The breakthrough came from a historical gift: Chinese translations. The meticulous record keepers of the Song dynasty and later the Ming produced bilingual glossaries and translated official Jurchen documents. Using these keys, scholars have successfully unlocked a portion of the script. We can read many administrative terms, official titles, and basic phrases. It is as if we have been given a dictionary, but one with half the pages torn out and no guide to grammar. The logograms that remain unread are often the most interesting, the ones that likely represent uniquely Jurchen cultural concepts, specialized ritual terminology, or place names from their ancestral homeland that held no equivalent in Chinese. The language itself adds another layer of complexity. Jurchen is a direct ancestor of Manchu, the language of the later Qing dynasty, which we understand very well. This relationship provides crucial clues, like hearing echoes of a modern word in an ancient, distorted form. But ancient Jurchen vocabulary and grammar differed significantly from its descendant. It is the difference between reading Chaucer's Middle English and a modern newspaper. The connection is clear, but the older form is full of archaic words and unfamiliar structures. The surviving inscriptions are themselves evocative artifacts, found on stone stelae marking imperial decrees and on the backs of bronze mirrors, objects of daily life and spiritual reflection. To fully decipher them would do more than add words to a list. It would illuminate the gritty reality of building a hybrid empire. The Jin dynasty was a colossal political experiment, a steppe power administering the world's most bureaucratic civilization. Their inscriptions could reveal how they balanced the nomadic traditions of cavalry and clan loyalty with the demands of Chinese-style taxation and legal codes. We could move beyond the chronicles written by their Song rivals, who often portrayed them as uncouth invaders, and hear the Jurchen's own rationale for their laws, their own accounts of key battles and treaties, and their internal debates about cultural assimilation. This script is the administrative and spiritual voice of a dynasty that stood as a formidable equal to the celebrated Song, a voice that can still tell us how medieval East Asia truly functioned when power was split, and a people from the northern forests dared to write their own chapter in the grand narrative of Chinese history. A warrior's amulet carries more than just a prayer. The runic alphabet of the Germanic tribes, the Futhorc, is a script we know intimately. We understand the sound each angular letter makes, and we can translate thousands of inscriptions from memorial stones to simple signatures. This knowledge makes the remaining puzzles all the more tantalizing. Scattered across northern Europe are artifacts from the migration period, small gold bracteates, the blades of swords, and weathered runestones, bearing sequences of runes that refuse to yield a clear meaning. They are written in the older 24-character Futhorc, used from roughly 150 to 800 of the Common Era, and their silence is deliberate. The problem is rarely the script itself, but how it is used. Some inscriptions lack clear word divisions, a continuous string of characters where one person's name might bleed into a verb or a magical formula. Others employ vocabulary so rare or so specialized, perhaps from a lost dialect or a secret priestly lexicon, that it appears as nonsense to modern eyes. Many are simply too worn, the crucial runes eroded by time, leaving a fragment of a message that invites endless speculation. But the most intriguing are those that seem to be playing a game. Scholars suspect some inscriptions are enciphered, using a simple substitution code where one rune stands for another, a practice noted in later medieval runic manuals. Others might use the runes in a non-linguistic, symbolic way, arranged in patterns for ritual protection or divination, their power residing in their visual form, not in a spoken sentence. A gold bracteate might bear a beautiful, looping inscription around the image of a god, yet the words it forms are obscure. Was it the name of the amulet's owner, a spell for safe travel, or the title of the deity depicted? A sword blade might have runes etched along its fuller, not proclaiming the smith's name, but perhaps a charm to grant the weapon victory or to bind its spirit. Deciphering even one of these cryptic lines would be like hearing a whisper from the so-called Dark Ages. It would add color and intimate detail to a period often defined by archaeology and Roman chronicles. We could recover lost fragments of early Germanic mythology, names of minor gods or spirits that faded from later Norse tales. We might find the original wording of a legal oath or a property claim, showing how customary law was formalized. Most personally, we could recover the private thoughts and charms of individuals, a farmer's plea for a good harvest or a mother's protective spell for her child, etched onto a piece of bone or wood that survived by chance. These enigmatic runes remind us that literacy, even in a known script, can serve many masters, from the historian carving a public legacy to the individual seeking a private, magical connection to the unseen world. The Fathark itself is an open book, but on these objects someone chose to write in a language only they, and perhaps their gods, were meant to fully understand. Standing stones in Scotland hold a gallery of silent beasts. The Picts, a confederation of tribes who resisted Roman conquest and later Viking invasions, left behind their history not in written chronicles but in granite. Across the landscape, they erected magnificent slabs carved with a stunning array of symbols, a visual language that remains one of Europe's most beautiful and baffling codes. You see a sleek, dolphin-like creature with a curled snout, the enigmatic Pictish beast, swimming across the stone beside a mirror and a comb. Elsewhere, a crescent shape intersects a V-rod, or a double disc is pierced by a Z-shaped scepter. These are not random decorations. They are precise, repeated, and arranged in consistent combinations, the hallmark of a sophisticated symbolic system. But it is a system that deliberately avoids being a script. This is the core of the mystery. The Picts were not illiterate. Later stones often include inscriptions in Ogham, the cryptic Irish script of notches, and in Latin, using the alphabet of the Christian Church. They chose for centuries to communicate their most important statements in these pictures. So what were they saying? The leading theory is that these stones functioned as a heraldic or genealogical record. Each symbol or combination of symbols might represent a personal name, a clan affiliation, or a territorial claim. A stone showing a salmon above a serpent could proclaim, "Here lies the warrior of the salmon clan, son of the serpent lineage." The mirror and comb, objects of personal adornment, might denote a high-status woman, marking a marriage alliance or a queen's burial site. The abstract symbols like the double disc and Z-rod could signify royal authority or a specific religious office. They are a non-phonetic code, a way of broadcasting identity and relationships to anyone in the culture who knew the key, while remaining opaque to outsiders like the Romans or the Gaels. This makes decipherment a uniquely visual puzzle. We cannot sound out the symbols, we must interpret their meaning from context, placement, and frequency. The stones themselves provide clues through their evolution. Early stones bear only the symbols. Later, Christian crosses dominate the slab, with the older symbols relegated to the sides, as if the new religion was accommodating an ancient, powerful language of identity. The final blow to understanding was the eventual merger of the Pictish kingdom with that of the Scots in the 9th century. As Gaelic language and culture became dominant, the knowledge of this symbolic code faded from memory. The stones stood as magnificent monuments, but their specific messages were lost. To crack this code would be to finally let the Picts speak for themselves. Our entire knowledge of them comes from the writings of their enemies and neighbors, who often described them as fearsome, painted warriors. Their own stones tell a different story, one of complex social hierarchy, deep connection to animals and the natural world, and a rich artistic tradition. Deciphering even a single combination could give us the name of a Pictish king known only as the Brood in Irish annals. It could map the territories of rival clans across the Highlands. It could reveal whether the Pictish beast was a mythical water spirit, a representation of strength, or the emblem of a specific royal dynasty. These stones are the Pictish version of a national archive, carved not on parchment but on the very bones of their land. Each symbol is a word in a lost language of stone, a language that could tell us how a people saw themselves before their name vanished from history, leaving only these silent, magnificent beasts and mirrors to guard their secrets. A sandstone slab taller than a man once stood guard at the mouth of the Singapore River. Known today as the Singapore Stone, its surface was covered in a flowing, ancient script, a public declaration carved by a forgotten hand. This was not a small seal or a hidden tablet, but a monumental statement meant to be seen by all who sailed into the harbor. And in 1843, British engineers clearing the area for fortifications saw it only as an obstacle. They blasted it to pieces. Today, only a few battered fragments survive in a museum, their inscribed faces worn almost smooth by time and tragedy. The destruction of the stone is a calamity for history. A library of a single volume deliberately exploded, leaving us to piece together a story from scattered, fading sentences. The script itself is a ghost of a writing system. The surviving curves and lines show a clear kinship to the elegant scripts of the ancient Indonesian world, particularly Old Javanese Kawi or the writing of old Sumatran kingdoms like Srivijaya. This visual clue anchors the stone to a specific time and a vast cultural sphere, likely between the 10th and 13th centuries of the Common Era. But the exact language it recorded is another layer of mystery. Was it a form of Old Malay, the lingua franca of the maritime trade routes, or was it Sanskrit, the sacred and administrative language of Hindu-Buddhist kingdoms across Southeast Asia? The few remaining characters are too damaged to settle the debate. Deciphering these fragments has become a desperate race against entropy. Each passing decade further erodes the already faint inscriptions on the porous sandstone. Scholars are now using advanced digital imaging techniques, attempting to pull letters from the stone that the human eye can no longer see, a technological rescue mission for a text on the brink of vanishing completely. The historical stakes of this recovery could not be higher for a nation. Modern Singapore's documented history is famously traced to its founding as a British trading port in 1819 by Sir Stamford Raffles. The Singapore Stone challenges that narrative entirely. If its inscription can be read, it would provide irrefutable proof that the island was not a sleepy fishing village, but a significant literate settlement centuries before European colonization. It would place Singapore firmly within the orbit of the great maritime empires that controlled the Straits of Malacca, a strategic outpost of the Srivijayan or later Javanese Majapahit realms. What might the stone have said? It could have been a declaration of sovereignty from a distant king, a record of a harbor tax levied on passing ships, or a religious dedication to a Hindu god like Shiva or Vishnu, whose worship was widespread in the region. Each possibility rewrites a chapter. A royal proclamation would give Singapore a named local ruler from a millennium ago. A commercial inscription would detail its early role as a thriving port in the spice and ceramic trade. A religious text would reveal the spiritual landscape of its first inhabitants. To crack this code would be to gift a modern city-state a deep, pre-colonial soul, connecting its gleaming skyline to a narrative of ancient Asian empires, sophisticated trade networks, and cultural exchange that flourished long before the age of sail from the West. The silent fragments in the museum are more than artifacts. They are the broken opening lines of Singapore's own origin story, waiting for the technology and the insight to let them finally speak. The gravel pit in Veracruz was not an archaeological dig. Workers were simply extracting material when their machinery struck something strange, a rectangular slab of serpentine stone. This accidental discovery, the Cascajal block, is the closest we have ever come to hearing the Olmecs speak in full sentences. Its importance cannot be overstated. Unlike the isolated symbols on a ceremonial celt or a pottery shard, This block presents a true text. 62 distinct glyphs are carved across its surface, arranged in clear, horizontal rows. You can see the scribe's intention, the deliberate spacing, the sense of a complete statement. This is not a random collection of pictures, it is structured language. Some symbols repeat in different positions, a strong hint that they are not just nouns for objects, but perhaps grammatical markers, verbs, or prepositions that stitch the narrative together. The very fact that we can see syntax, the architecture of a sentence, is what makes the block so revolutionary. The glyphs themselves are a window into the Olmec mind. You can recognize a stylized insect, perhaps a bee or a beetle. There is a clear depiction of an ear of corn, the staple of Mesoamerican life. Another glyph resembles a throne or an altar, a symbol of authority and sacred space. These are not abstract scratches, they are icons from their world, rendered in a style that is undeniably and uniquely Olmec, sharing the same artistic DNA as the colossal heads and the word jaguar sculptures. When it was first presented, some scholars met it with deep skepticism. A full Olmec text found out of context in a quarry, it seemed too good to be true. But rigorous analysis of the carving technique, the mineral patina, and the style of the glyphs has convinced the vast majority of experts the cascadal block is authentic. It is real, and that reality presents us with our greatest opportunity and our most agonizing near miss. This single slab could be the master key. If we could decipher just this one inscription, we would have a complete deciphered Olmec sentence. We would know for certain what at least one sequence of their symbols actually means. That knowledge would provide a fixed point, a Rosetta Stone fragment. We could then take that understanding and apply it to the shorter, more cryptic inscriptions found on other artifacts. The symbol on a jade celt that always appears alone might suddenly be identifiable as a verb from the cascadal text. A glyph on a figurine might match a noun. The entire scattered corpus of Olmec writing could begin to click into place, one deciphered word at a time. The block is a locked door, but behind it we can sense an entire room waiting to be illuminated. What does it say? Is it a foundation myth recording the story of a people emerging from the earth or the sea? Is it a legal decree outlining the rights of a ruler or the tribute owed by a village? Or is it a religious invocation calling upon the rain god or the jaguar spirit of the underworld? For now, the serpentine stone holds its silence, a complete thought from the mother culture of the Americas, resting in a museum case, waiting for the day we finally learn to read its first foundational sentence. While ancient stones and clay tablets whisper of lost civilizations, a book bound in vellum sits in a Yale University library, screaming its mystery in every illustrated page. The Voynich manuscript is unlike any other entry on our list. It is not a worn public monument or a fragment from a forgotten city. It is a complete, beautiful, and utterly baffling book, created with obvious care and purpose in the early 15th century. Its 240 pages are filled from edge to edge with a flowing, elegant script written in characters that belong to no known alphabet on earth. The text has a natural, rhythmic cadence with words separated, sentences that flow, and patterns of letter repetition that mimic those found in real human languages. It looks and feels like a real book written in a real language, and yet, for over a century, the world's top code breakers, linguists, and mathematicians have stared at its pages and understood not a single word. This is not a case of a lost language. It is a script and possibly a language invented entirely from nothing. The writing is only half the enigma. The manuscript is lavishly illustrated with paintings that are just as strange. There are pages of fantastical plants, hybrids of roots and flowers that do not correspond to any known botany. There are intricate circular diagrams of zodiac signs, with nude women standing in strange, interconnected barrels of liquid. There are elaborate charts of celestial bodies and networks of pipes or vessels that look like a mystical plumbing system. These images are a visual language we cannot read, accompanying a written language we cannot decipher. The central question is as profound as it is simple. What is this book? The theories span the spectrum from the brilliant to the bizarre. Some argue it is an elaborate, centuries-old hoax crafted to deceive a wealthy patron. But the statistical properties of the text are deeply complex, showing linguistic patterns that would be nearly impossible for a medieval forger to fabricate without computers. Others believe it is a coded scientific or medical treatise, perhaps containing heretical knowledge about herbalism or astronomy, disguised to avoid persecution. Yet no proposed cipher, from simple substitution to polyalphabetic codes, has produced a coherent translation. The most tantalizing idea is that it represents a genuine text in a constructed language or a now extinct natural language, a lone survivor of a linguistic branch that died with its author. This possibility means the Voynich manuscript is not just a locked book, it is a library of one volume, the sole representative of an entire intellectual tradition. Its resistance to solution is legendary. It was studied by the very cryptanalysts who broke the Japanese and German codes in World War II, and they left empty-handed. Modern supercomputers running algorithmic analysis have mapped its structure in exquisite detail, confirming its linguistic-like properties, but they cannot tell us what it says. This has earned it the title of the Mount Everest of cryptographic challenges, a peak that has defeated every expedition. To hold a digital copy of the Voynich manuscript is to feel the full weight of human curiosity meeting an immovable wall. You are looking at a message that was clearly meant to be read, filled with knowledge someone valued enough to painstakingly illustrate and transcribe. You can see the careful pen strokes, the vibrant colors, the intellectual ambition on every page, and you are met with a silence more complete than that of any weathered stone, because this silence comes from behind the deliberate, beautiful hand of a fellow human being who chose, or was compelled, to write an entire world of thought in a language meant for no one else. It asks us the most unsettling question of all. What if the greatest secret a text can hold is not its content, but the reason it was ever created in the first place? Another handwritten book defies comprehension from within a Hungarian library. The Rohank Codex is the Voynich manuscript's lesser-known but equally perplexing cousin, a dense volume discovered in the 19th century in the town of Rohank, its origins as mysterious as its text. Bound in leather and filled with 448 pages of dense, handwritten script, it presents a puzzle wrapped in the familiar format of a religious tome. The writing itself is a cascade of over 190 unique, elegant symbols, flowing from right to left across the page in neat, separated words, suggesting a real language with grammar and syntax. But the alphabet belongs to no known civilization. Interspersed among the text are strange, small illustrations that deepen the mystery, blending unmistakably Christian iconography, like scenes of the crucifixion, with seemingly pagan symbols, suns and moons and crescent shapes. This visual clash creates a bizarre theological landscape, a book that appears to worship within a framework we cannot place. For over a century, the Codex has been a siren call for Hungarian scholars and amateur cryptographers, each convinced they hold the key. The proposed solutions are a map of desperate ingenuity. Some argue the script is a cipher for Old Hungarian, written in runes before the Latin alphabet took hold. Others see a distorted form of Romanian or a lost Dravidian language from India somehow transported to medieval Europe. There are theories that it is a coded diary, a secret Hussite religious text, or an alchemical manual. Each new decipherment claims to reveal a few plausible sentences, but then collapses under scrutiny, unable to coherently translate the entire work or gain acceptance from the academic community. The very abundance of contradictory solutions points to a fundamental problem. Without an external reference, any pattern can be forced to fit a desired meaning. This leads to the shadow hanging over the entire project, the possibility of forgery. The codex's provenance is a blank page. It appeared in the library of the Hungarian Academy of Sciences in the 1830s with no record of where it had been for the previous 300 years. Such a gap invites skepticism. Could this be an elaborate 19th century hoax crafted by a talented linguist with too much time and a mischievous mind? The motive might have been fame, a political statement, or simply the intellectual challenge of fooling the establishment. Scientific analysis, however, complicates a simple answer. Examinations of the paper, the ink, and the binding materials consistently date them to the 16th century. The physical book is genuinely old. This does not, of course, prove the script is. A brilliant forger could have acquired period materials, blank vellum from an old ledger, and inscribed his invented language upon it, creating an artifact that would pass material tests but carry a fabricated soul. So we are left with two equally staggering possibilities. If the Rohank Codex is authentic, it represents a completely unknown strand of European religious thought, a heterodox blend of Christian and pagan belief that was meticulously recorded in a unique script and then lost to history. Its pages could contain sermons, prayers, or heretical doctrines from a clandestine sect that operated in the shadows of the Reformation, their voice preserved in a code that protected them from the Inquisition. To decipher, it would be to recover a lost chapter of spiritual history. The other possibility is that it is one of the most successful and audacious forgeries ever perpetrated, a work of fictional philology that has consumed generations of honest scholarship. In this light, the Codex is not a text to be read, but a mirror of our own desire to find meaning, a 400-page Rorschach test where we see the languages we wish to find. Solving it would not unveil a lost world, but expose a breathtaking act of historical deception, a joke that has lasted for centuries. The book sits on the shelf, a silent testament to either a forgotten faith or a timeless prank, and we cannot yet know which is the more remarkable truth. A linen book was meant to be read, not used as bandages, yet that is precisely how the longest Etruscan text in the world survived. A bizarre twist of fate that preserved a voice while obscuring its meaning. This is the Liber Linteus, the linen book of Zagreb. Its story begins not in Italy but in Egypt, sometime in the 1st century before the Common Era. An Etruscan ritual calendar, meticulously handwritten with black and red ink on fine linen, ended its original life. The cloth was carefully cut into long strips, and those strips were used to wrap the body of a young woman for mummification. For nearly 2,000 years, the text lay silently against her skin, its sacred words repurposed as mundane packing material. When the mummy was unwrapped in the 19th century, scholars were stunned to recognize the script, but the message remained locked. The Etruscan alphabet itself is not the problem. We can read every letter aloud with confidence. They borrowed and adapted the Greek alphabet so the characters are familiar. The word eyes, for instance, is clearly written, and we know from other sources it means God. The challenge is the language itself. Etruscan is not an Indo-European language like Latin or Greek. It is a linguistic isolate, a unique tongue with no close living relatives. Without a lengthy bilingual text, a true Etruscan Rosetta Stone, we are left with a dictionary full of holes. We have gleaned meanings from short funerary inscriptions like son of or wife of, and from loanwords that passed into Latin. But for longer, more complex sentences, we are often guessing. The Liber Linteus is a heartbreaking gift in this context. It is extensive, over 1,200 words long, organized into columns like a real book. We know its subject, a religious ritual calendar. You can see the Etruscan names for months repeated in a cyclical pattern, followed by lists of ceremonies, offerings, and likely the names of deities. We can parse the structure, follow the liturgical rhythm of their year, but the specific verbs, the adjectives describing the nature of the sacrifices, the epithets of the gods, these crucial details dissolve into a fog of unknown vocabulary. It is like having a complete schedule for a grand, ancient festival. You know the date, you know there will be a procession at noon and a feast at sundown. But you do not know what prayers will be chanted during the procession, what specific foods will be served at the feast, or which honored guest will give the blessing. The gaps are not trivial, they are the very substance of the ritual. Deciphering these remaining sections would do more than add words to a lexicon. It would animate the spiritual world of the people who taught Rome everything. Before Rome built its forum, the Etruscans were masters of engineering, art, and elaborate divination. Roman religion, from reading omens in bird flights to the very concept of temple architecture, is deeply Etruscan. To read the Liber Linteus fully would be to have their own manual for communicating with the divine. We could finally understand the precise logic behind their famous bronze liver of Piacenza, a model used for haruspicy, the art of reading entrails. Which god corresponded to which section of the liver? What did a flaw in a specific zone actually signify? The linen book could tell us. We could move from seeing their vivid tomb paintings of banquets and dances to knowing the liturgical calendar that governed those celebrations. What festival required the masked dancers depicted on so many walls? Which month was dedicated to the underworld gods, and what offerings appeased them? This text is the direct liturgy of a civilization that shaped Western Europe, recorded in their own hand on cloth, then lost beneath the wrappings of a different culture's eternity. It is a sacred text wrapped around a body seeking immortality, a perfect metaphor for the Etruscan language itself, preserved yet concealed, waiting for the day we learn to read not just its letters but its soul. A king's name echoes in a language we cannot understand. Far to the south of Egypt, along the fertile bend of the Nile in what is now Sudan, the kingdom of Kush built a civilization of immense power and sophistication. From their capital at Meroe, they ruled a vast territory, traded gold and ivory across the ancient world, and even conquered Egypt itself for a time, ruling as its 25th dynasty. To record their own glory, they created a unique script, one that stands as a monument to both a brilliant decipherment and a lingering, profound silence. This is the Meroitic script, developed around 300 years before the Common Era. It came in two elegant forms, a formal hieroglyphic style for monuments, inspired by their northern neighbors, and a flowing, cursive script for everyday use on papyrus and pottery. For centuries, their inscriptions were just beautiful, meaningless marks. Then, in the early 1900s, the lock was picked. Scholars, building on earlier work and a handful of royal names known from Egyptian texts, successfully deciphered the alphabet. We know what sound each of the 23 signs represents. This was a monumental achievement. We can now stand before a sandstone stela at Meroe, trace the elegant cursive lines, and read it aloud. The consonants and vowels form words, names, and titles with clear phonetic value. We can pronounce the name of a queen, perhaps Ammonionas or Ammonishakito, the very rulers who famously fought the Roman legions to a standstill. We can vocalize the funerary prayers inscribed in their pyramid chapels, and even read the casual graffiti scratched onto temple walls by ordinary citizens. And yet, for all this phonetic clarity, we are deaf to the meaning. It is the ultimate tease of epigraphy. We have the key to the script, but we have lost the dictionary for the language. Meroitic is a linguistic island. It shows no clear relationship to ancient Egyptian, nor to the Semitic or Berber language families. A few proposed links to languages of the Nilo-Saharan family, still spoken in the region today, remain speculative and unproven. Without a relative we understand well, we are stranded. So we have these perfectly pronounced texts, and they might as well be in code. A funerary inscription might read, Amore, quid pelmos at car, and we have no idea if that is a prayer for eternal life, a list of the deceased's titles, or a curse against grave robbers. The structure of the language itself adds to the mystery. It used suffixes, little endings added to word roots to convey grammatical meaning, similar to how we add an s for plural or ed for past tense. We can see these suffixes, these patterns of repetition, but we cannot attach specific meanings to them. We know where the grammar happens, but not what it is saying. This leaves the history of one of Africa's greatest ancient kingdoms trapped in a glass case, visible but untouchable. Kush was not some remote outpost, it was a major power. Its iron production fueled economies, its archers were legendary, and its diplomats negotiated with Ptolemaic Egypt and Imperial Rome as equals. The Meroitic texts are their own press releases, their own history books, their own religious doctrines. To finally understand them would be to hear this African empire's story from its own perspective, not filtered through the accounts of its Egyptian or Roman rivals. We could learn how they organized their unique queen-centered monarchy. We could discover their own explanations for their military campaigns and trade agreements. Most intimately, we could access their religious beliefs, which blended Egyptian gods like Ammon with distinctly Kushite deities, and understand their own words about the afterlife. The pyramids of Meroe, hundreds of them, stand as silent sentinels over the desert. The script gives them a voice we can hear but not yet comprehend. Breaking the language barrier would do more than solve a puzzle. It would reconnect a severed thread in human history, allowing a civilization that rivaled Rome to finally tell its own epic, in its own words, across the silence of the sands. From the sun-baked Indus Valley to the remote island of Rapa Nui, these 30 undeciphered scripts are far more than academic curiosities. They are locked doors to entire chapters of the human story, each one representing a civilization's profound attempt to shout across the centuries, "We were here, this is what we knew, this is who we were." Their silence is not an emptiness but a presence, a persistent challenge to our understanding of the past. Every etched line on a clay tablet, every carved symbol on a stone monument, is a deliberate act of communication, a message in a bottle thrown into the vast ocean of time. And we are the recipients, holding these bottles, squinting at the faded writing, yearning to understand the sender. The quest to crack these codes is far from over. It is a living, breathing field of discovery, energized now by tools our ancestors could never have dreamed of. Artificial intelligence can process millions of linguistic patterns in seconds, searching for statistical ghosts of grammar and syntax that the human eye would miss. Advanced imaging techniques can resurrect ink invisible to the naked eye or map the subtlest impressions in weathered stone, pulling texts back from the brink of oblivion. Yet, for all this technological power, the human element remains the irreplaceable spark. It is the passion of the dedicated scholar who spends a lifetime on a single script, the curiosity of the amateur linguist who sees a pattern others overlooked, and the collective hope that the next archaeological dig will unearth that one crucial bilingual text, the Rosetta Stone for a lost world. Perhaps one day a modern-day Champollion will find the key. A student in a lab, an archaeologist in a trench, or a programmer running a new algorithm may suddenly hear the click of a lock turning. And when that happens, a voice silenced for millennia will speak again. We will not just translate words, we will recover a perspective. We will learn how the Olmecs named their world, hear the hymns of the Minoans, understand the laws of the Zapotec kings, and read the history of Singapore from a time before empires sailed from the west. Each deciphered script will fill a blank space on our map of human experience, reminding us that history is not a single story, but a chorus of countless voices, many of which we are only now learning to hear. So we leave you with a question, a thought to carry forward from this journey. Which of these silent scripts do you believe holds the most important secrets? Is it the foundational Proto-Elamite ledgers from the dawn of cities, the defiant Rongorongo texts from the world's most remote island, or the beautiful, maddening mystery of the Voynich manuscript? The answer is as personal as curiosity itself. Let us know in the comments below which lost voice you most wish to hear. And if you want to join more expeditions into history's greatest puzzles, be sure to subscribe. The past is never truly silent. It is only waiting for us to learn how to listen.